So, much like yesterday, we are going to go through just the arithmetic of a lot of the questions that you'll actually have to do on your homework. I don't know if you put together yesterday that the warm-up problems that we did that were just numbers were actually the same numbers that were inside the equations that on your homework. So if you pay attention to these and you understand how to do these, when you come across the same exact numbers on your homework, it'll be a lot easier to go through, especially those adding, subtracting with the common denominator stuff. This will have a lot of cross-canceling, so we want to make sure we have those skills honed in and we're not messing up on fractions while we're trying to do algebra. So let's go through just a few of these and make sure we got it. It won't be very long. I'm trying to get you guys started pretty quickly. So recall that if you're multiplying a proper fraction just by an integer, a whole number, it's the same as if it's over 1, so you can just cross cancel those like that. Likewise, you can just actually multiply these and get negative 10 divided by 5, which is also here, there's nothing that cross cancels, so just multiply across. Top and bottom. And don't forget the negative. I highly suggest putting the negative on the top. Only for the reason that if you put the negative on the in front of the fraction, sometimes this happens. You go negative, and then you go 9/4, and then every now and then this just kind of gets blended in, and that will look like a positive 9/4 because the negative and the fraction bar not connected. So if you put the negative on the top always, that will never happen. It's the same answer. Remember, if you have it on top, middle, or even bottom, which you don't see too often, but those are all equivalent. So even if we multiply two numbers on the bottom and they're negative, I usually write the negative on the top. It's the same thing. Going back to number 3, cross cancel 2 times. So 4 goes into 25 times. Typically 4 goes into 4 one time. And then 7 goes into 7 one time. 7 goes into 4 one time. We have 5 times 1 with a negative. Negative 5 on the top. And a block 3 times. So negative 5 first. Leave as a improper fraction. Not change it to a decimal, not change it to a mixed number. Just like that. One more time. 7, 7. Oh, 7 goes into 7 one time. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 10 5 times. We have negative 5 times 1. And since it's 1 times 1 on the bottom, we have not too bad. So if we can do this, and we can remember how to do this anyway, pretty good. It's a little more practice. Let's do just a few problems. I know. This is the problem. Next slide, actually. There we go. There's the right one. So we add, subtracted both sides with equations, and you can multiply and divide with equations as well. We're going to try something a little different just so we have this skill down really, really good. So instead of dividing, we're going to multiply all equations by the reciprocal. All of them. So you'll never divide both sides. On this homework, we'll not divide both sides by anything. We'll multiply by the reciprocal. And that's what you practiced 2 nights ago on the back side, is finding, well, what multiplies to 1? What do I need to multiply by to get 1? And that was the reciprocal. Okay. So, all right. So like here, we'll change on the, so something like 5x equals 35 times what is 35? We're actually going to write that as 5 over 1 x. And make it a fraction. Same thing on number 2, negative 3m. I'm always looking on the side with the variable. So negative 3m, I'm going to write as negative 3 over 1. That's just if you have a nice integer coefficient. Coefficient is the number in front of the variable. We're going to make it over 1, and then we're going to end up multiplying by 1 over 5 on both sides and by 1 over negative 3 on both sides. Yes, you do get the same answer if you divide, but we're just trying to really practice this because we're going to have so many fractions all the time. We don't want people saying, well, I know how to do it when we divide, but when the fractions involved, that's when I get lost. We'll just do everything as if it's a fraction. You'll get really good at it, and you won't have to worry about missing something because it's a fraction. Now, what about like number 3, where it's kind of a fraction? We have x over x divided by negative 6. Okay. Well, what number is technically in front of the x? 1. So that's technically a 1x. And what you can do is you can separate the variable and the fraction. So if you move that x out of there, it's now something that's in the right format. 12 equals 1 over negative 6x. And now we can clearly see, oh, we have to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is negative 6 over 1. Same thing on number 4. Right? There's a 1 there, and if you move that y out of there, now we can see it's 1/4 y equals negative 8, and multiplied by the reciprocal. It makes it a little bit clearer to see, because they're making all the, no matter what format the question's given to you in, we're going to change it into the same exact format so we can just repeat the same step, not having a bunch of different pathways to go. All right. So far so good. This slide is just, here's how you set it up. Set it up to get ready to multiply by the reciprocal. This is very similar to what we did before when you had like a double negative. We took a whole step to rewrite it as a plus, and then we started the problem. Kind of similar to that. We're prepping it, putting the right format so it's easy to work on. Okay, so step 2 is actually, these are the same problems you just wrote down, so you can just continue. To actually multiply by the reciprocal. So now we have 5 over 1. We're going to multiply by 1/5 on both sides. Now reciprocals always cancel and equal 1. That's why we like reciprocals. And then on the right hand side, 35 times 1/5 is 7. Note that 35 divided by 5 is also 7. Dividing by 5 and multiplying by 1/5 is the exact same thing. Taking half of something and dividing it by 2, think about it, that's the same thing. So you can always write a division as a multiplication. All right, so same thing on number 2. Make that a fraction and then multiply by its reciprocal, which would be 1 over negative 3. You could also say negative 1 over 3. As long as the negative is there, it doesn't have to be on the bottom. That's kind of easier that way because it's flipped. So, yeah, so negative 3 over 1 times 1 over negative 3 equals positive 1. It cancels out. Cancels out. And the left-hand side, 9 times 1 over negative 3, or 9 divided by negative 3. Same thing, equals negative 3. And if you want to rewrite it with a variable in front, that's fine too. And we already started number 3 by moving that x out. Now you have the fraction to multiply by the reciprocal. Negative 6 over 1. There you go. And one more. 4 over positive 1. And y equals negative 32. That's on the screen there. There we go. Not too bad. And you can see that there are there's nothing like yesterday. We don't have any adding, subtracting. So on Monday, when we come back, we're going to have both the adding, subtracting we did last night and this multiplying by reciprocal tonight. We combine them into one, and we'll practice that really, really good. All the different little possibilities. Okay? Not too bad. Go ahead and try a few of these. Check with someone next to you. I'll be walking around if you need help. There's the solutions. Ready? Okay. I don't think we need to do more of them, but just let's get started on the homework as soon as we can. So before we do, though, I did mention that your answer should be fully reduced. That's a given. You don't have to ever ask, do we have to reduce it? That's a given. Sometimes, though, usually when you're doing word problems, that's when you would take something like 7/2 and change it to 3.5. Like, how many days is it going to take you to get there? 7/2. Nobody talks that way. You say 3.5 days, right? So that's when you convert things. Otherwise, you always have your answer the same format as the question. So if the question has fractions, your answer is going to be a fraction. If this was money and you're doing the problem, you wouldn't say, well, how much do you owe? Oh, $7/2. Nobody talks like that. So those are the kind of indicators you use to say, well, I'll change that to $3.50, 3.5. So, but don't change it unless you have a reason to because of the problem, because your answer doesn't make sense if it's left in that format. Okay, don't go off. Don't do the extra work. In other words, of converting it if you don't really need to. Okay, so we will get to this a little bit later. We'll start doing a lot of word problems and tasks and things like that and projects, and we'll come across that. So, but for now, it's going to be mostly improper and proper fractions, meaning one number on the top and bottom. Okay, so let's look at the homework. Get started on those. Let me pass that out. We can do a few, have a few examples, and get started. Okay? Let's try number 1. Remember, the first step is going to be to prep it. Ready? So the number in front here is 1. Number in front is 1, so change this to a 1/12. So get it ready so we have a fraction that we can actually flip. So here we really don't have a fraction to flip. When we write it like that, we do. And now we can multiply the reciprocal both sides. 12 times 1/12. You have 12 pieces of each size 12, 1/12. And 1m, right, equals, and then 9 times 12 is, so there's two types of math going on right here. There's algebra and arithmetic, right? Algebra is the fact that you can rewrite this as 1/12m, and that you know what the reciprocal is, and you multiply both sides by the reciprocal. That's algebra, that's the class you're in. The other math here is just knowing what 9 times 12 is. That's called arithmetic. Okay? Remember, you can use a calculator on any homework, quiz, test, final. So you should not miss any problem because of, well, I didn't know what 9 times 12 was. As long as you have the algebra down, then you need to know what the steps are, and you should be good for this class. Keep that in mind. If the arithmetic is kind of slowing you down, please just get a calculator to help yourself out. Any requests on the left column? Any other problems you'd like me to go through? 3, 5, 7, whatever you like. So everybody can do those. Let's flip it over then, go to that. Now, if you look at your notes carefully, you'll see that these are the same numbers from the warm-up. So as you're doing this, you might want to make a note. Look at your notes. If you're not sure about all those fractions, the only thing you need to know how to do is reciprocal, so you know how to multiply by -7/4 both sides. If you're kind of stuck after that, arithmetic, we did that in the warm-up. So look at your notes, help yourself out. So as you do your homework, make sure you have your spiral notebook open, because you'll see very similar, or if not the same question. What about something like this? It looks pretty basic. So let's print this. 13. 2 will rewrite as 2/1. Make it a fraction. And now that's a fraction, we can multiply by its reciprocal. So step 1 is make it a fraction. Step 2 is multiply by its reciprocal. 2/1 times 1/2. Reciprocal is always equal 1. So we got x. 1x. Bring the equal sign straight down, and then 1 times -5/2. There's no cross cancel, right? So just 1 times -5. -5 on top. And on the bottom is 2 times, technically there is a 5/1. We usually don't write that. So if there's nothing on the bottom, like 1/1. Think of it as a 1. So 2 times 1 is your final answer. So box or circle all your answers. Lastly, there's some problems with some decimals. I would really prefer you just use a calculator, but we can go through one of them and do the long division by hand. But it's not something you really want to have to do during a test or a quiz. Do a long division problem. Kind of past doing that. They'll show the algebra though. They'll show all the algebra. So that equals 1a. But now you have to do the long division. I'll show you one time, but a calculator is fine. If you had a calculator, you just type in 12.32 divided by 2.8 and put the answer. That's fine. But let's say you didn't have a calculator. Let's do a little review on how to do that. You do 2.8 on the outside. You do 12.32 on the inside. We really usually don't want to mess with decimals, so we multiply both by 10 and move the decimal away. So it turns into, which will have the same answer, 28, into 123 points with the decimal. And from here, it's the normal steps. How many times does 28 go into 12? It doesn't. How many times does 28 go into 123? I think it's about 4 times. Right? And you multiply, well, what's 28 times 4? You have to go off to the side sometimes, figure that out. So we got 32, that's a 2, that's a 3. 2 times 4 is 8. Carry the 3 is 11. 112. So you can see how much work it is, how much it would really slow you down on a quiz if you're doing all this by hand. We got 92. The decimal points will line up, so it's going to be 4 point something. And then how many times does 28 go into 92? And it goes in 4 times even should get an answer of 4.4. But once again, I prefer you not have to do this on quizzes and tests. Just have a calculator handy. You can't use a phone app on your tests and quizzes. So you have to have, just one of the cheapies, 99 cents will work. And then all I would see on your quiz or test would be this. Because I'm grading you on algebra, not arithmetic. I'm not going to grade you on if you do this right. I'm going to grade you on did you write 1 over 2.8 multiplying both sides. You're showing me what a reciprocal is, okay? That's what's important in algebra. All right, so I gave you a few examples to go through. Please finish this up before you come to class on Monday, and have a good weekend.